This is all theater. This is all just political theater.
Political theater. Political theater.
Pure political
Theater.
Theater.
Political theater.
The
nefarious,
Significant and protracted
political
theater for political theater's sake.
I yield back.
From Washington, this is Political Theater, Roll Call's review of the spectacle of politics on Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jason Dick.
On Capitol Hill and across the country. I'm Jessica Wehrman, and I'm managing editor at CQ Roll Call, and this week I'm filling in for Jason Dick, who is on sabbatical. We are now nearly 8 months into the second Trump administration, and if you use the previous administration as a benchmark, we've seen a rapid shift and reevaluation of pretty much every aspect of public policy. That includes energy and the environment. Climate change? Meh. Drill, baby, drill? Absolutely. For many, it's been sort of a dizzying reversal, and it's kind of hard to catalog and wrap your mind around all the changes we've seen in a little over half of a year. Fortunately, we have with us today David Jordan, who has been covering these seismic changes for CQ and Roll Call. David's a longtime beat reporter here, a William and Mary graduate, the pride of William and Mary, for those of you who keep track of these sort of things. First of all, walk me where things be. Like you were covering the Biden administration, that everything was sort of moving in a certain direction. You know, we were cutting down on emissions, that sort of thing. And then Trump 2.0 hits. What happens? Talk to me a little bit about how things began.
Yeah, so a quick refresher for people going all the way back to 2021, when the Biden administration came in with what many people felt was, a mandate to do something on climate. And kind of pushed by the left wing of the Democratic Party, they started negotiations on what eventually became the Inflation Reduction Act that passed in 2022. And that included a ton of initiatives, including just money for programs that the EPA would run. But one of the biggest parts of it was tax incentives for all kinds of clean and renewable energy, nuclear, geothermal, and two of the biggest renewable sources, wind and solar. And pretty much immediately, or even before that bill was passed, Republicans dreamed of overturning most, if
It was
most
the new
parts.
ACA, right? It was the new Obamacare.
Exactly. So they come in this year with, a trifecta, and they want to take apart the law, essentially. Now, there's a lot of debate within the party itself. There's many members from moderate districts who say wind and solar isn't great. It's not the best source of energy, but we don't want to, cut off these emerging industries right now. Mm-hmm. And then there's members of the party who want the law gone completely. They think pretty much none of it's redeemable. And so the reconciliation package included a lot of changes to these tax incentives from the IRA. And I think a lot of people were surprised by what passed, that ultimately it veered towards the people who wanted the law gone completely, more towards their vision of the world.
This was like repealing Obamacare, except, insert environment for Obama.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And except it largely happened for a lot of...
Yeah, because they didn't repeal Obamacare. They kept that. But they repealed basically everything.
Well, everything for wind and solar, we should say. They kept a lot of things like geothermal and nuclear. Now, those are...
Tell me about geothermal energy.
Yeah.
I don't really know much about that.
So geothermal, just basically, it's using the heat that's in the earth itself to kind of, create the energy that you would normally create through heat by burning coal or gas or oil. And it's really promising, especially in the western United States, not so much the eastern,
which is why probably,
I'm not a geologist. I won't get into plate tectonics, but
thank you for that.
Yeah, but geothermal has a lot of Republican and Democratic support. A lot of the support from geothermal comes from the fact that you can repurpose a lot of technologies used for oil and gas extraction. Our Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, he was chief executive of an oil field services company before his current position, and he invested a lot in geothermal because you can use the same kind of drilling technology.
So I'm thinking like, and the Washington Post always does this ins and outs at the beginning of the year. So like in is geothermal and nuclear, out is wind and solar. And so two of these renewables were okay. Why no wind and solar? I mean, that doesn't seem like it would be.
Yeah, so
You can't stop with the wind.
So the big debate is you look at kind of the division between baseload and intermittent power. And baseload is anything that can keep running 24/7. Obviously, power plants fluctuate in real life, but to oversimplify it, you say something that can run 24/7. So you have things like gas plants, coal plants, geothermal, nuclear. It will not stop. And intermittent power where as many Republicans will say, when the sun stops shining and the wind stops blowing, what are you going to do?
Not reliable enough.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
But you can alleviate a lot of those concerns with battery technology.
Okay. So it is store it there and then you could just okay.
Exactly. Yeah. But a lot of Republicans are kind of skeptical that batteries can fill the gap enough. And so the Trump administration has really taken moves to support baseload power. And one of the big reasons they're arguing that is energy demand is increasing for the first time in decades.
Wait, let me talk about that. Why? Why is that? What is it because of the data centers or is
Exactly.
It, oh, okay. Hey, good guess. All right.
Yeah. So energy demand actually remained flat for a very long time.
That's interesting.
Because, even though we were adding population, probably like 80 to 100 million people in that time, it stayed flat because our fridges became more efficient, our lighting became more efficient, everything that we were, plugging in became better at using that power, even though we were using, more electronic devices.
Yeah.
So kind of in the last couple of years, though, we've seen energy demand begin to climb again. And most of that is solely from data centers and artificial intelligence, which, as we know,
you don't think of those as necessary. I mean, I guess you think of the data centers, but that's not one of the things I automatically think of. I think like my air conditioning, for example, takes up a lot of power, but data centers and stuff.
Yeah, and so because we have kind of a limited grid, we don't have a huge amount more than what we had a few years ago, but we're adding on these data centers it seems like every day you can find a new announcement of Facebook or Anthropic or OpenAI, signing some deal to add a new data center that they say they desperately need.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Trump administration, super supportive of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're kind of seeing we need to maintain this baseload power, and it's coming at the expense of wind and solar.
I mean, the argument from Democrats was basically we want a little bit of everything, but that's not. I mean, that's just not. They're just saying let's go all in on these other two, geothermal and nuclear, and obviously oil and gas.
Yeah, anyone who covers energy for any amount of time, you get so sick of hearing the phrase "all of the above."
Yeah. Sorry.
That was the.
I was like trying to figure out what can I trigger David Jordan with today.
For decades, they've kind of been saying all of the above. And it was, Republicans leaned on all of the above a lot during the Biden administration. The argument kind of being we need, to make sure we're continuing to use oil and gas because they saw the Biden administration maybe moving away from oil and gas, even though, we were producing record amounts under the Biden administration. So, go on CQ.com, type in all of the above and see how many congressional
we can make
hearings.
it a drinking game.
Yeah. I think you'd get pretty drunk pretty quickly if you were covering a hearing in 2023.
But so what's the motto now? If it's not all of the above, what is it?
Yeah. So the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, he's kind of said on the Hill this year, he more concerns himself with affordable, reliable energy.
Okay.
And he's specifically defined that to exclude wind and solar for the large part. And a lot of his like the nominee to lead the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, kind of had the same refrain when she was being considered last month on the Hill. And yeah, so the affordable, reliable energy is kind of focusing on that base load we were talking about.
Yeah, reliable, sort of implying solar is not reliable. Or yeah, okay. Well, so let's talk about affordable. I mean, we've talked about the reliable, but so is this more affordable? Is this a more affordable option? One would think a little bit more. I mean, my mind is kind of thinking the more options I have, the more affordable it would be, particularly if there's a higher demand for energy. But is this more affordable?
Yeah, so that kind of gets into what the arguments Democrats are starting to lean into now, because you say we need more energy in the coming years because, OpenAI and Anthropic are
not going to go away. Yeah.
They're not going to go away, and they're not going to wait. They're not going to say, well, we're going to launch this product 3 years from now once you get that new gas plant offline, or once you refurbish that nuclear plant to get a few more gigawatts on the grid. They're not going to wait. And so with energy prices increasing, kind of the sources you can get online quickly are wind, solar, gas, and then battery power, to supplant the wind and solar. And Democrats are starting to argue that this reconciliation bill you passed this year really kneecapped wind and solar at a time when we need to be bringing more of it on.
Okay.
And that's been that argument's also been reflected in the private sector, where the CEO of NextEra Energy was saying, as they were debating the reconciliation bill, we need, even if you want to bring gas plants online, even if your ultimate goal is, a gas-dominated system, we need wind and solar now, because that can be brought on the fastest. And that was one of the big arguments Tom Tillis made, one of the...
Oh, so that's kind of one. Okay, because, for those of you who remember, Tillis was the Republican from North Carolina who decided not to run again, and in part because he was really getting a backlash from Trump because of his opposition. So this was the energy portion of what he opposed about the bill.
Yeah, he made the same sort of argument that, gas plants are... New gas powered plants are a few years off.
Yeah.
And we need more energy now. So, don't take wind and solar off the table. I mean, the law itself gives, projects a year to start construction. And then if they start within a year from July 3rd or 4th, when the law was actually signed, they can get the Biden era credit.
When you say the law, you mean the reconciliation?
It's the reconciliation.
The Trump reconciliation. Okay.
So that giving them that extra year was kind of a way to get on some of the Republicans who supported the reconciliation bill, but were a little worried that, they were kind of harming projects that were very close to being finished. Like the Lisa Murkowski, Joni Ernst, Chuck Grassley. Iowa's a huge wind producer.
So they had these huge energy products from the Biden administration coming online. And okay. And so this was their sweetener to get them to support one big, beautiful.
Yeah, to kind of say, like, we're not going to let these tax credits go on forever, but we're going to give a pretty short timeline for the people that are pretty close to being, pretty close to either breaking ground or, even finishing to kind of...
We're not cutting you off cold, but we will cut you off eventually.
Yeah. So, it's like they don't want new projects planned under the Biden credits regime, but they don't want to hurt people that are putting the finishing touches on their blueprints.
So Tillis, you were talking about Tillis. He was still opposed, though, even after this?
Even after. I mean, the 1 year extension kind of came as a last minute amendment, pretty much. Like, I think we were getting text of that like 2 hours before the vote, but, it was not enough to get Tillis on board. And obviously he had objections over other provisions as well. But.
So, I mean, already this is political implications because this is why he opposed it. And Democrats are using this. I mean, is this a political winner? Like, we're way ahead of like the midterm elections, right? That's a long ways away. But I mean, what can happen in terms of the energy sector that will make this a big political issue in the months to come? I mean, what sort of things might we see from the big beautiful bill, as it's called, that would sort of make a difference in voters' minds?
Yeah, I mean, climate voters have always been, they are a segment of the population. There are definitely single issue climate voters out there, but they are, nearly universally
Democrats.
staunch Democrats.
Yeah.
So, the kind of like 2020 world where people were very eager to address climate change seems to be a little bit in the rearview mirror now. And, the winning message for Democrats may not be, the Trump administration is going to make it harder for us to reach our climate goals, make it harder to reach that 2 to 2.5 degrees.
Hard to fit that on a campaign placard, right?
But what we're seeing is some Democrats are starting to argue that, climate aside, this bill is also going to likely increase emissions, according to many estimates, is also going to make your energy bill more expensive. And so
that seems to be the one that I like. That's one where I'm kind of going, oh, this would probably make, more expensive energy. People theoretically voted on milk prices last time around. So
exactly. I mean, it becomes a pocketbook issue to say, we're already seeing that many people's energy bills, and energy is one of those things that's, different in different parts of the country. You can always read about gas prices. Now they vary by region.
Yeah.
But, what you pay your utility is currently rising above the rate of inflation for the vast majority of the country, if not all of it. And so if it reaches, if people start noticing, then certainly the Democrats are going to be likely to lean into that message that we've already seen, and some of them laying the groundwork a little bit for. And it's notable because it's kind of a flip, because during Biden's time in office, we saw a lot of Republicans making the argument that we shouldn't move in a direction of renewables because they are more expensive. The argument that the electric car costs you more when you go to the dealership.
Yeah, that was the whole. So what? Can you talk to me a little bit about this flip? I mean, what's the Republican stance now? I mean, the Democrat stance is basically the same one that the Republicans had made.
Yeah, I mean, it's always easy to argue when you're out of office that
The other guy is
screwed
up. Yeah.
You're feeling the pinch. It's their fault. That's an easier argument to make when you're out of the White House.
Maybe it's wind and solar are cheap, or they make it cheaper somehow because there's more competition.
So we're going to need to bring on wind and solar just because the demand is immediate and rising fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And, utilities.
The need is now.
The need is now. Utilities need to fill the gap, and wind and solar present the best opportunity in kind of the immediate term, according to most industry analysis. And so, one argument is they need to bring on the wind and solar regardless. So by getting rid of these tax credits, you're making the project itself more expensive. And by making the project itself more expensive, the utility has to do more through financing, and then kind of, not to get too deep in the weeds of the business, but the financing is reflected in the price you pay because the utilities, are passing that on to the consumer. So, you may have, and these numbers are, pulled completely out of air, but if you have a project that was going to cost you $50 million with the Biden era tax credit, and then it'll cost you, $75 million with the Trump era credit, then,
that's more
that
expensive.
difference,
Yeah.
it's just plain more expensive.
Well, and also the higher demand too, which that wasn't the case during the Biden administration necessarily. I mean, maybe towards the end, but as the data centers, took off. So, so how do you boil that down for a voter? You just say they are increasing your prices for energy, right?
Yeah. So Daniela Altamari, one of our reporters here, and I did a story last month, kind of looking at that, and Yeah, it is. It is maybe a little difficult to boil down.
Yeah.
But I think Democrats are optimistic that they can make a pretty simplistic case, like, hey, that one bill you maybe didn't pay that much attention to. You notice how it's like 25% more than it was last year. You notice how,
Energy's the new milk.
yeah,
Energy's the new eggs.
yeah, and maybe the way Republicans were arguing about egg prices in 2024, we'll see Democrats saying like, you know, you you have to keep your house a little warmer this summer.
Yeah.
Like you maybe are a little more worried about, what your kids are doing with the light switches around the house. And, that is a definite argument.
When do we see the impact of that? I mean, do you think it'll be like pretty soon, or do you think it'll be over time? I mean, winter's coming. Of course, now we're in air conditioning season. So, like, when do you expect that voters would see the impact of these repeal, or would it be over time?
I think that's a little difficult to say right now, because a lot of these are kind of projections based on economic, best understandings of how the
It's like the
energy system
tariffs.
works.
Everyone sort of
Yeah.
said, well, not everyone. There's a whole audience that says this is going to drive prices up, but
Mhm.
it hasn't really yet, or if it hasn't, it's been slow.
Yeah, and so it could be hard to maybe boil down, and that's where the politics comes in.
Yeah.
It's hard to boil down to one exact source. I mean, your energy prices may go up because there's instability in the Persian Gulf, and they're having the price of oil and natural gas are going up because they're a global commodity.
There's a lot of things that play into it.
But it's the same way egg prices went up for probably a variety of reasons. But
People
general
like to just blame it on the other guy.
yeah, general inflation goes up for a variety of reasons. You can't really boil it down to one thing. But in politics, you get to kind of create a narrative, and we've seen a lot of Democrats starting to create the narrative that energy prices are going up because Republicans are so averse to wind and solar.
This is completely flipping the script on what the Democrat or what Republicans have said about Democrats in the past. So, all right. I really thank you for coming and joining me today. I have to come up with a word of the day. Intermittent, occurring at irregular intervals, not continuous or steady. So the argument is basically from Republicans that wind is not steady, which I guess they have a point, but this is why we have batteries.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me today, David. Appreciate it. And Jason will be back in September. Thanks.